my show, ding dong.
Hello! February 24th, 2025. There's no time to waste. It is the French language liberal leadership debate. Welcome to the show, everybody.
It's my show,
We're going
ding
to
dong.
silence this and we're just going to get right into it.
Liberals, the place of Canada in the world.
I'm sure we'll have time to chat about this, but it's a big night. Carney's first stress test
and for each of these
in French, not his first language. I don't think it's anyone's first language, except maybe you could say Frank Baylis, but I'm not sure if it's technically his first language.
And at the end of the evening, each candidate will have 90
he probably
seconds for a closing statement.
Possibly better French,
Some of the
or
questions
the
that will
best
be asked this
French.
evening were sent in by Liberals
then you
registered
probably
throughout the
say
country. None of the questions asked this
Freeland
evening
or
was
Gould
seen either by the candidates
as
or
the
their
next best.
teams.
And then, of course,
And throughout the
just
debate,
minutes ago,
one of
the
my
Liberal Party
responsibilities
confirmed that
will
Ruby
be to
Dalla will not
ensure
be
that
allowed to
candidates
rejoin the
have
race. Her
a
appeal
time
has been
to
denied.
speak, equitable time to speak, rather than a timed equal
That's our
time.
quick
Now,
30-second catch-up.
I ask you to exercise some
That's it.
discipline in the debate, and let's try and respect the time.
Yeah, it's more
And
like
if I
a
have to, I will have to
a
call you to
primary
order and
debate
break
in the States. More
but
like
I
it.
know that you're all wise people with a lot of experience and you'll respect all the rules. So let's go and
Closer
we'll
to
start
that.
with your 90-second opening statements, and I hand over right away to
Like
Mr.
when you had like
Baylis.
Sanders and
Good evening. My name is Frank
Biden and
Baylis. I'm
Kamala.
a professional engineer.
I don't
As a
know.
businessman, I built up many
This
businesses.
China,
in the health
I
sector.
actually would
And with
maybe
that, I
suggest I
created
don't
thousands of
think
employments in high technology
the
sectors.
Communist Party of China has leadership
recognize that
debates, or at
collectively-
least hasn't had them recently.
We are facing important challenges. Having said that, I'm very optimistic for the future. Yes, I do have hope for Canada and faith in Canadians. And I have a plan so that we can develop our full
This is
potential.
Frank Baylis.
This evening, I'm going to concentrate on three priorities. First is to build a strong economy, a resilient
Former
economy.
businessman. Baylis
Which will
Medical
benefit us all.
Technologies, I believe.
Secondly, I want to improve our health system so that it will
The
become
Chinese
the
one?
best
I
health
don't know.
system in the world. And thirdly, I also want to modernize the federal government so that it can deliver programs and services and do it more efficiently for the benefit of our citizens. Together, we will build a Canada that is proud and prosperous for all Canadians. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Baylis. Madame Gould, c'est à votre tour.
Thank you, Mr. Baylis. Madam Gould.
Thank you.
He does seem
The
pretty smart.
future is what unites us here tonight. Coming from a middle-class family in Burlington, Ontario, and now, as a mother of two young children, I understand what Canadians are living through. They're concerned. They want to know if they can pay their mortgage, fill their gas tank, or even retire. We are facing serious challenges for our economy and our sovereignty. But this challenge also offers us amazing opportunities. I'm very proud to be Canadian, especially today. Citizens throughout the country are mobilizing. We have the opportunity of regaining the confidence of Canadians, of uniting our country to defend our economy and to protect our values against threats coming from south of the border, and to counter our version of Trump here in Canada. I didn't enter politics to become someone. I decided to go into politics to help my fellow Canadians and to do good things. With a decade of experience, I know how to get there. A prosperous future where Canadians are at the heart of every decision.
I'd say it's unfortunate
Our
that we have to
adversaries
listen to
say that
the
Canada is broken,
translation,
but we
so we
know
can't
that
really
this
judge
is a
the French.
wonderful country.
But by the nature of the fact
Tonight,
that I have
want
to
talk
listen to the
about
translation,
my
I probably wouldn't be a
projects
very good judge
so
of their
that our
French.
country can be even stronger. I am the candidate for today and the future.
Thank you, Madam Gould.
Freeland.
Madam Freeland.
A few
Giving
weeks
you
ago,
education minutes.
in Saskatoon, I met a little 4-year-old girl. She asked me whether I could prevent
I
Trump
can
from
sort of
invading
understand
our
it, but it
country.
just wouldn't be enough to judge. I would not judge their French by any manner.
And that's why I am
Guys, I've been
standing
here for
to
10
lead
years
the
and I'm not
Liberal
Trump and I
Party
want to help. Yeah,
and
basically.
to become the next Prime Minister of Canada.
I'm not saying anything, Nathaniel. You can make your own
Trump
comments.
represents the greatest threat to Canada
I think it's called makeup.
since World War II.
I think it's because she basically doesn't
He
wear
is
it.
threatening
Or
us
doesn't
with an
wear very
economic
much
war.
of it.
And that's
usually.
nothing new. The last time that he was president, he threatened us too. And at the end of the day, I succeeded in protecting our economy. But this time, Trump's threats are worse. He wants to turn Canada into the 51st state, and it's no joke. That is why he is supporting Vladimir Putin's criminal attempt to redraw Ukraine's borders. Trump wants to redraw our borders too. We need a leader who understands the seriousness of these challenges
Is this loud enough?
and how to face them. A leader that can respond and defend everyone in our wonderful country.
All right.
I will
It
fight
is a little
for
quiet
us.
for me, but that might just
I will
be my
fight for
headphones.
Canada. And together, we will win.
Thank you, Ms. Freeland. Mr. Carney now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jobin. I'm Mark Carney. I was born in the Northwest Territories, and I grew up in Edmonton. Throughout my life, I've had the opportunity to serve our country as Governor of the Bank of Canada during the financial crisis of 2008. At this time, Canada is facing the worst crisis of our lifetime, and to get through it, we have to make big changes. I can be useful there. I know how to get through crises. I know how to build a strong economy. Yes, there's a lot of uncertainty. And in a crisis, there are things that you can't control. But you have to focus on the things that you can control. We are the masters in our own house, and I know that we can control our own economic destiny. I have a plan to invest more in you, a plan that makes our businesses more competitive, a plan that builds a strong economy that works for everyone. Canadians.
Yeah, it seems like Carney's getting
stand
given a
up
lot
for
of benefit
Canada.
of the doubt on his French.
So am I. Thank you.
And that may have to do with how Polyev is polling in Quebec.
Canada's place in the world. We've been speaking about it since his election. Donald Trump wants to impose tariffs on Canada of 25% on all commercial products exported to the United States, and of course, making Canada the 51st United States state. You will have 1 minute each to answer to the question in the order that was set out earlier. So this is a question of getting warmed up, because as we move along, the debates will get a little bit warmer. So a question from the public to start off. Diane Bonnet from the Quebec was asking how Canada can improve its commercial relations with other countries than the United States. 1 minute, and Ms. Freeland starts.
That is an excellent question, because you understand that Trump represents the greatest threat to Canada since World War II. What we need today is allies, and we have to find them and work with them. And I know how to do that. I am the minister who forged a free trade agreement with the European Union and who signed an agreement with Asia-Pacific countries. We need those allies more than ever. You put an economic question. We need to work together on the economy. We need to work on tariffs in reprisal against those imposed by Trump, and we need to work to cooperate better than ever on national security. We have to work with our allies to protect our economy and our security.
Well, thank you, Ms. Freeland. Second answer, Mr. Bayless.
It's an excellent question, because we know that at the present time, 80% of our trade goes towards exports go to the United States. That's why I propose a new economic bloc that would gather
Did you
Canada,
hear about the
United
Rwanda
Kingdom,
doing on the eastern
Australia,
border?
and New
No, I
Zealand.
didn't.
Why? Because
This
we
was
share
Rwanda
the same
doing.
kind of government. We share the same kinds of values, the same language. Well, of course, English, the English language as a common language, and it means that we can work together closely. And not only that, but when I was in England and I also sold products worldwide, and I recognize the importance of having agreements of this kind, international trade agreements, especially when we want to harmonize regulation. It really helps to have our products travel throughout the world. So it's a plan that I propose for Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Ms. Gould.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Diane for this excellent question. Most Canadians are thinking about this very thing. One thing that we learned after the first Trump presidency is that we had to adapt and broaden trade relationships with many other countries.
Goddamn
Christian
leftist audio strikes
spoke
again.
about free trade agreements with Europe, but also with Asia and Latin America. And what the federal government can do is to help Canadian businesses to access these important markets. We have to understand that Canada has a lot to offer the world, but we have to help businesses to diversify from the U.S. and to enter into these new markets. That is what a government under my leadership will do.
Thank you, Ms. Gould. Mr. Carney.
Well, thank you, Diane, for your question.
Karina is? Why?
First of all, I'd like to point out
Doesn't
that
she have
Canada will never, ever
I know she
be
speaks Spanish,
part of
but-
the U.S. in terms of diversification of our allies and our trade allies.
Okay.
We can focus on the free trade agreement with the EU, CETA, but we have to have levers. We have to leverage our assets. We have to become a superpower of clean energy. We
You
have
like
to
Karina,
create supply chains.
She's quite
for
likable on
critical
its
minerals
face.
and metals.
That's not, I don't blame you. Chief of
We
Staff
have to
formerly worked for
use
Mexican Embassy in Canada. Oh,
our culture that we have here, especially here in Montreal,
usually
in Quebec.
trilaterally.
And we have to have a
Any trade
relationship
for
with
Mexico has to
jurisdictions
come
and
through the
countries
US,
like the
usually.
EU, the Francophonie, and the UK that share the same values that we do.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. So let's follow up with the second question. So this question is a follow-up question.
Chief
You
of
have 1 minute
Staff
to answer.
is COS.
Mr. Bayless will be answering. And then a 5-minute debate amongst you will follow. So why should Quebecers and Canadians, Mr. Bayless, believe that you are the best
Yeah, no
placed
worries.
candidate to
That's
defend Canada's
the
interests
Ottawa bubble.
in
We
this
just
commercial
throw
war
out
with the
goddamn
United States?
acronyms willy-nilly, assuming everyone understands.
I've already negotiated hundreds of contracts with Americans, and from time to time, I've seen Mr. Trump's character at work, and I know how to deal with him. And on this issue, I published an article in the newspapers just one day before Inauguration Day. And I said that he wasn't... I said that he was going to target steel first, and that's exactly what he did. So I can't predict what he's going to do, and that's why I feel that I can prepare our defense and our counterattack as well.
Does anyone want to answer?
Parce que je l'ai déjà fait.
Because I've already done it. I've negotiated with Mr. Trump. I negotiated NAFTA, the new NAFTA, and we succeeded in getting a better agreement. This is not the first time that Mr. Trump is threatening us with tariffs against tariffs on steel and aluminium. We responded
Let's build a tunnel.
with counter tariffs, dollar for dollar.
Did he? So,
and
I'm
at
not
the
sure
end
he
of the day,
sold
we
it to it. I have
won.
to double check.
A response has to be intelligent, and if we remain united, we will win. I know how to do that.
So just how far can we go, Mr. Carney?
Well, we have to recognize
Big ass tunnel
that
under
today's
Mexico.
Trump is very different from the Trump of the past. He's more isolationist. He's more aggressive. In the past, he wanted our markets. Now he wants our country. So we have to focus on the things that we control. We can't control President Trump, but we can be a master in our own house. We have to strengthen our economy immediately, and that will strengthen our negotiating position
Thank you, Mark. And what you're saying is absolutely true. And we do need to reinforce our economy, but we need to stand up for the Canadian economy faced with Donald Trump. And what I'm very proud to see is how Canadians throughout the country are standing up
Boston
against Donald
Scientific
Trump's threats.
acquired Baylis Medical Company.
We're going to succeed because Canada is strong, but also we are doing things smartly. And Krista did excellent work with Kuzma the first time, and we can't respond in the same way this time around. But what the president does respect is force, and I know how to respond to people that I don't agree with. I do it in the House of Commons. I've been doing this for many years.
Not easy.
No, it's not easy. It's not easy.
Madam Freeland?
But I have confidence in Canada and the Canadian team and the unity of our country.
I completely agree with you, Karina. I am so proud of the very personal response of Canadians across the country. But I don't agree that we can't respond to President Trump and win. Canada is strong. That's important. We are the largest market for the U.S. We're more important and larger than China, the UK, and France and Japan combined. So we need to mobilize the U.S. with a strong response.
Two sub-questions. Mr. Legault's talking about reopening the trade agreement. Is that a good idea? To reopen the free trade agreement with the U.S.
Well, the previous agreement is over. He's already ripped it up. That's a fact. I'd like to add something to what Christian just said. The U.S. needs us. They need us. They do. But in a negotiation with this president,
we sold for free.
You have to be clear.
I see. That was the mix-up.
What's never on the table? Culture, for example. Our resources like water, for example. Supply management. Those are off the table. That's how you start a negotiation.
Freeland jumping in with the very helpful correction to his French.
More than that, we cannot leave our industries behind. It's not just those issues. There's
Game
also aluminum
on,
in
folks.
Quebec, the forestry industry, the agricultural industry. I said that one of the first things that I would do as a prime minister is to protect supply management. I would say this in my speech from the throne. We need to stand up for all Canadians and our economy. This is not up for bargaining.
Last question. François Legault is talking about possible closing off hydroelectricity exports to the States. Now, in your plans of counterattacks against Mr. Trump, the exports of electricity, could they be cut?
Oh no, just Carney was sort of. I think he was trying to remember the words for something in French, and Freeland jumped in very helpfully to provide the words for him.
And it's extremely good that he's ready to use anything.
Well, you have to keep all your
very
cards
kind
close
of
to
her
your
to do
chest.
that.
I agree with what Christos said about this. It can include semiconductors, oil, and other Canadian resources. Those are assets that Americans need.
We need to make sure that, as my colleagues mentioned, Canada is strong, and so there's a lot of things that we have that the Americans need, and we need to make sure that whether it be individual Americans or the U.S. president, they need to understand that they're depending on Canadian resources.
Our 5 minutes are up. 15 seconds.
Alors, de parler d'un compromis ou de parler de négocier une troisième version de l'entente, ça donne rien.
It's important to understand that we already have an agreement in place.
Sorry, I'm ordering McDonald's.
It's
I didn't have time to eat
Trump
dinner
is
because I was writing.
a hard negotiator,
You guys have a good
but I
asylum
know how to
system
deal
and-
with him.
Yep.
I have the experience that will tell me how to deal with him.
You might want to
it's
hold
not
up on
opening
that.
a third negotiation. It's a different plan.
Let's move on to our next question. Team Canada approach. was adopted to react to Trump's threats. How to ensure that the various governments of Canada, provincial, territorial, and federal work together against the American threats, because the day that 2 or 3 provinces start infighting and they're no longer agree, then Mr. Trump will have a lot of fun seeing the conflict at home. So, Ms. Freeland, you're up first.
That's really an excellent question, and thank you for pointing out the ideas that Premier Legault is raising.
Honestly, the more I look
I've
at this, the
always
more I
said that
think
with
my
the
joke
United
tweet
States,
from
we
earlier
need
kind
to
of
be
called it.
united, strong and smart. And
They
that
all
begins with
are
unity.
just a bit red.
And unity begins with very hard work with premiers, provincial and territorial premiers, and I know how to achieve that because I've already done it during the first NAFTA negotiations, and I did it during the pandemic. We worked very closely with the U.S. I know that.
Yeah, I'm
today
starting
there's a
like
wave
I noticed it on the
patriotism
side of her
across the
face. It's
country.
the like
I meant during COVID we worked
the
very closely
big
with
giant
premiers.
red
I know
red
that,
like LED
Quebecers and
screen
the people of Quebec will strongly
right
support
behind her.
a united approach across Canada, and as Prime Minister, I will be.
Because
the
I
leader who
noticed
will
it
unite
as she
and defend
turned,
the
it was
country.
like
Well,
creeping across her face, and I was like, oh wait, because see, you can sort of
Prime
see it
Minister, no
on
matter he or she
Oh,
is,
wait.
must
I guess
convene
this
the
side, because
premiers
I'm
of all the
flipped on the
provinces
screen,
and
but this
territories,
side
and
of
that must be done
Carney's
immediately.
face.
To do 2 things. First of all, to
I mean, at
create
this
one single
point, just
Canadian
for
economy,
entertainment
not 13
value, you've
different
got to
ones.
just say Trump. Just
If we have one single
throwing
Canadian
Trump
economy,
into any political debate at this point would really
the
just
positive impact
really be fun.
will be more than be more than the negative impact of Mr. Trump's tariffs. That's the first thing. Second thing, we have to have a strategy, as you've said. It has to be a Team Canada strategy, and it's the responsibility of the Prime Minister of Canada to lead that strategy.
Madam Gould.
Thank you.
Bush would also be an entertaining
President Trump will
insert
be there
into
for
the
4
liberal
years.
leadership
So
debate.
we have to have a relationship with him because he's going to try to create a chaos, but we do need a calm leader, a leader able to unite people.
Harry
And that's an
versus
excellent
Gore
idea to
versus
make sure
Carney.
that we have meetings with the Council of the Federation.
Try not
frequent
to
meetings,
doze off
but
challenge.
to choose
Sorry,
industries
Mr. Carney.
and to decide what can be negotiated. That's not possible. I agree to make sure that we have one economy and not 13, and that we need to tear
Sarah Taylor
down our
close third.
domestic trade barriers, but we also have to respect the differences between provinces and territories. One of these trade barriers has to do with French language. And so we have to do this in conjunction with the provinces and territories in a way that unites the country so that we can have a strong Team Canada
Mr.
approach.
Bayless.
Well, approximately 50% of our exports towards the States are energy. So you asked a question
Nate,
about
did you see
electricity
Gould's
coming
tweet?
from Quebec. Mr. Trump says that he's going to slap 25% tariffs on it. No, he's made that threat. What I would say is, why would he stop at 25%? Let's say he goes to 100% tariffs. And then he's going to explain to taxpayers why they have to pay double the price for their electricity.
Yeah.
And then he's going to say, no, Mr. Bayless, we're going to send you the bill. And I'm going to tell him, send me the bill. I'm not going to pay
No,
it.
there's 4.
So it's not going to be
Freeland,
me that
Carney,
cuts
Gould,
electricity.
and Bayless.
It's a question. So if he's the one who's going to end up cutting off electricity himself, because we're not going to pay the tariff on the energy.
I'm going to take some
And that's how
time
we're going to deal with
before
him.
we go to the next question, because you talked about the unity of Canadian provinces against Trump. Well, what about the Canadian population? There's a survey that says some 15 to 20% are favorable to being annexed to the United States, and there's some groups who will give voice to their ideas. But how to convince the Canadians who think that they should go that way?
Food's on its way.
Convince them
Hell
that
yeah.
They should support Canada and stay united.
That's an excellent question, and it shows one thing that I think we
Quarter
can all
pounder
agree on,
with
and
cheese.
do all agree on, is
like a
that Pierre
reward.
Poilievre is completely unable to be the
yeah,
leader
you can have
that
some of my
Canada
fries.
needs now. He's a leader who can't unite Canada. He'd rather sow division, and he's too weak to face up to Trump. That is why the Liberals will win the next election, because we are the party who will defend Canada.
That won't be easy.
If I could enter into the debate, I think that one of the
Yo,
things
don't ask, just do it.
that we haven't done sufficiently well over the past 10 years is to unite Canadians and to ensure that people are proud to be Canadians.
Assert yourself,
And
Ms.
now,
Gould.
People are hearing about the 51st
No, yeah, no,
state,
it's
and they're
fine.
saying no. They're standing up and saying, no, we're very proud to be Canadians. We should have more moments of national pride of who we are as Canadians. And one thing that I'd like to end on, if you'll allow me, is that this polarization in our society, this is something we need to work with people who are feeling marginalized so that we can have a greater amount of people who feel
May I ask
the
for short
Canadian
answers?
pride.
So go ahead, Mr. Carney.
I think I
totally
can
agree with
confidently,
Karina and Christian
objectively say that Karina Gould
on
is
the
a
attitude
people.
of
You're
Canadians.
good on that one, Camilla.
They want to stand up against the Americans.
Yeah, she
But
does
Mr.
have good French.
Poilievre is trying to
wonder if
divide
we can, like,
Canadians. Mr. Poilievre,
I can pull up like the
who
French
he's a
language
man
one.
who venerates Mr.
so we can,
venerates
like,
Mr.
hear it.
Trump. He can't
I
negotiate with him.
completely agree.
Mr. Bayless.
Canada is a proud and
Oh,
strong
here's
country.
CPAC with it. They'll
So
have
what are we missing right now is a certain level of leadership at the federal level. So what
They
we're
cut
seeing
to
right
commercial,
now
we
is
can
that
go
the
back and
provinces
listen to
are going in all directions. They are armed with goodwill.
Sid Luke.
But we need to be unified. And with a strong leadership at the federal level, we'll be able to do that.
I'm sure you could do it.
We've
You could
seen
still
over the
donate
past
to our
2
campaign.
weeks that everyone in the country
Well, no, you have to be a
has,
Canadian citizen.
has bound together to fight against this threat. Pierre Poilievre says, well, he's going to
think
do
you have
what
to be
Trump
Canadian citizen,
wants. But for
sure.
Canadians
Don't do.
throughout the land,
Pretty
they
sure you have to be
stood
a
up,
Canadian citizen.
And this makes me so proud
Just
to be Canadian.
safe. Don't do.
Okay, fine, everybody.
That's right.
We'll come back to this. But it's
Election
true that
fraud
I
on-
added a question
on
because
my
we were talking about
recommendation.
Canadians in the province. So let's go now with a follow-up question for a 5-minute debate amongst all candidates. What would be your concrete actions that Canada should implement, and we're changing the sector to encourage a sustainable solution to the Israeli conflict, Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Madam Gould.
Thank you. This is one of the most complicated conflicts in the entire world, and I'm pleased that we finally have a ceasefire. Canada's position should be to work towards peace and security for two peoples, for the Palestinian and the Israeli people, so that they're able to live in peace and security side by side.
Food's almost
Where
here.
Canada can play an important role
They
is
can't extradite you.
to
We'll send
work,
in Batman.
on this. There is too much suffering for people in this part of the world. Canada participates in humanitarian missions. We have to make sure that we can provide more humanitarian aid and work with both sides, but also with people throughout
That's
the
what you
world
think.
globally to seek peace. This
He's
is
been
our only
undercover this
option.
whole
Who wants
time.
to follow up?
I just want to add one thing. When Mr. Trump says things that are false and that violate the international rules-based order, we have to be very clear that we don't agree. Mr. Trump's declarations on Palestinians in Gaza are not acceptable.
Of course, I'm
And
missing the
more than ever,
one of those.
for Canada today, a rules-based international order is extremely important. And we have to be clear that Canada will be
Mr.
a rule of
Jobin, if
law
I may.
country.
Mr. Jobin, so we need to reclaim our place on the world stage with confidence, and that means that we have to stop towing the American foreign policy, especially when it comes to the Gaza region.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's because it is consistent.
What does that mean?
Like when you compare it to her stance on Ukraine, it's consistent to that.
We have to recognize them as a people, and we have to recognize them as a nation.
Maybe, or do you mean it's just weird for her to want to
recognize Palestine?
We've been trying to do that for years, unsuccessfully.
Yes, we've been talking about it, but we haven't done anything. So I think the time has come to do it formally. And I firmly believe that it's the best way of establishing durable, sustainable peace.
Carney, what's your position on this?
Well, first of all hostages must be returned to their families. That's the first thing. Secondly, there needs to be assistance for Gazans. There are two things now which are unacceptable. First of all,
well, I mean, she said we need to reject Trump because he was saying there's no two-state solution because we're going to
real estate deal.
Colonize
that
it.
Idea, that
and put up, like,
commitment by Pierre Poilievre to cancel all international assistance, including
they didn't have any
Gaza
soda,
and
so I just
Ukraine.
got
That's unacceptable.
I just want
Orange
to
drink.
add that I'd like to thank Mark for raising the issue of hostages. I believe that everyone here, all Liberals...
Was he the first one to bring up the hostages?
Returning the hostages is a priority.
Oh,
yes,
no.
Our position must be a two-state solution, and we need to work towards peace. And with regards to a future government of a Palestinian state, we must ensure that Hamas does not play a role, and
easy dub on
it's
that
the only
round.
way that we will ensure lasting peace. This is what we want.
I think their soda machine just might have been broken.
So when I say that we should recognize a Palestinian state, it has nothing to do with Hamas. It has to do with the population. We want to help them rebuild.
They're all scrambling.
So it's not. I'm not proposing for one moment that we'll work with Hamas.
We all agree on Hamas, on a two-state
No, we don't agree with
solution.
Hamas. No, we're against
Yes,
Hamas,
we're all against
absolutely.
Hamas. We are.
I think he was saying, oh no, did he accidentally say we all agree with Hamas when he meant
But it must be a Palestinian state, a viable state, a united state that exists next to...
No, I can see it. Like when it's up on the full screen on mine,
peaceful
you can
and
see it. There's
secure
flow over here.
Well, we
and
see
on
that
this
during our
side of his
lifetime, well, we
face.
can hope so. So, do you have a minute each to answer? And I want to ask you how you envisage a dialogue with Mr. Trump. With what tone? Personal? With, be it Mar-a-Lago or with what assurance? The President of Poland went to meet him a few days ago, and he had to wait an hour and a half outside of his office to talk for 10 minutes. President Macron was there today. Apparently, he's satisfied of today's meeting, but how Mr. Trump will wake up tomorrow, we have no idea. So I'd like to know, if you're in an office with Mr. Trump, who's very threatening and all of that, so one after the other, tell us, what can you do with this guy? He's very intimidating, no?
I think
I would guess
first of all,
the
I don't think
Polish.
I'd bother go seeing him. No, I'm serious. I would send
I don't
a
know if you're allowed to
delegation
say that,
for
Nathaniel.
discussion purposes, but I wouldn't put myself in a position where he can demonstrate that he wants to be overbearing or intimidating. So he can talk to me, but otherwise I'd send a delegation.
I would begin not by negotiating with
I don't
President
know.
Trump in person.
That's just one of those
Because
where
like
it's
all
like,
political leaders, President
if
Trump
it is
listening
okay, it definitely
to
doesn't sound like it.
U.S. voters. It's Americans who are important to him. And that's why we have to begin with a short answer with a list of counter tariffs to put pressure that comes from within the United States.
It's impossible to talk to him. I know you have.
But what I'm saying is that we need to create pressure internally in the States. I would suggest 100% tariffs on Teslas to target Elon Musk, to create pressure within the White House. It worked with steel and aluminium, and that's why we have to begin with a strong response.
Dollar for dollar tariffs. That'll have a maximum impact on the US and a minimum impact here at home. And then we have to reinvest
Holy
those
shit.
tariffs in
Frank Graves
businesses and workers. I think we all agree on that, don't you?
hinting that he might be about to release a poll that shows the Liberals
Mr.
in
Trump.
first. From Frank Graves. We're triple-checking numbers and adding cases to ensure proper representation of key subregions, but results are on pattern with trajectory we first identified in mid-January. It's no longer a question of whether LPC can close the gap. It's now a question of whether CPC can recover. Holy fuck.
Needs to answer? 10 seconds.
Yes, but we can't say that we're not going to talk with Mr. Trump. We have to have talks with Mr. Trump.
J'ai pas dit que j'allais pas parler. Je ne mettrais pas dans cette position.
Well, maybe I won't go to Washington, but I will talk to him and
We'll
I
see.
will explain.
Still a long
why
way
Canada
for
is
that.
a
I
sovereign
mean,
country, and that's not up for negotiation, and that we are strong and we're united.
It's almost like if
but
the
also
Conservatives,
that there are issues
even
that
if
we
the
need to work
Conservatives
on
don't
together,
win
and we can
a
find a way
majority,
to work
who are they going to be
together
more mad at? Carney or Trump?
against countries
Well, you had 1 minute each. Some of them went a little bit over,
that are
but we'll
adversaries.
not worry too much about that. No, another question for you. And speaking first to Mr. Carney. Mr. Trudeau was in Ukraine today on his 3rd anniversary of the war. We learned today that Canada will be providing $5 billion, 5,000 armoured car vehicles. Just how far
that
can
translation
Canada's
right.
financial assistance go? And is that something that might displease Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, Mr. Bayliss has just mentioned a moral-based Canadian approach, and I'm very proud of the approach by the government of Canada and by Canadians themselves. It's been their approach to Ukraine has been
That was my
great.
dumb
We've
joke.
supported Ukraine because it's a democracy which is suffering an illegal, unjustified, horrible invasion. I said it at the start of the conflict. I'm proud to be a Canadian. I'm not welcome in Russia, Christian
Blocs will
either.
not win
Yes, we
seats
all are.
outside of Quebec.
We all are.
Generally because they don't run
Maybe not Pierre
We have to
Poilievre.
have
candidates
principles.
outside of Quebec.
We have to follow them. And any discussion on the future of Ukraine cannot happen without Ukrainian participation.
I'm going to open debate on that point. Just how many billions of dollars can we
And the Liberals
spend to
and the
help
NDP is
Ukraine and
currently
how?
trending
Mr.
towards
Jobin, I'll
Single
begin by
digits?
saying that we have to be there. We have to stand with Ukrainians because Ukrainians are defending democracy, their sovereignty, but at the same time, as they're doing that, they're defending our democracy and our sovereignty, because this war involves
Liberals at 40%, Conservatives 38%, NDP 11%, Bloc 5% from the New Leisure poll. That would be if Carney wins the leadership.
the rules-based international when I was Minister of Finance, and I'll
Open debate
continue.
amongst all of you.
You mentioned that it was the 3rd anniversary of the start of this war.
Leger
This was
showing the Liberals leading at 40% ahead of the Conservatives at 38% under the leadership of Mark Carney.
very somber day today, but last week we saw that
From
Mr.
Hadi
Trump
Hassan
abandoned the free world
with
because he had
TVA
talks
Nouvelle.
with Putin, and so Putin started this war. And I think that Canadians can be very proud of our response in Ukraine, but also we have to be allied with the Europeans. This is our freedom that is on the line. And so I think that you're going to see that we agree with this approach because there's more to lose with the loss of Ukraine. And for Canadians, we are there to defend democracy throughout the world, but also in our own house.
Yes. With Mr. Trump, we're seeing a fundamental shift in the way things are managed on the world stage. And not only that, but he's essentially allied himself with Russia, which is completely unacceptable.
How would that even work? That sounds almost as dumb as the people who are like not to call you dumb, Nate, but like the people who are like, oh, Wab Kinu's going to replace Jagmeet Singh before the next election.
Everyone?
How would they do that?
That we have to work with countries, Nordic countries, and Denmark.
Thank you, Christian. I'd like to point out that Pierre Poilievre was against the Ukraine
They've spent so much money.
free trade agreement for ideological reasons. That's completely outrageous.
So we're going to change themes now. We're moving on to the second theme of tonight's debate, building a strong economy. 1 minute each.
The real tinfoil hat is that a certain prime minister who may have had a recent biography written about him that is one long Machiavellian metaphor.
We have a very impressive deficit of some $60 billion.
Planned this all along.
Budget. So when do you foresee a return to a balanced budget? Ms. Freeland speaks first.
That's the real good tinfoil hat stuff. That's the
We
uncut.
are all liberals, and we will not
The uncut conspiracy.
conservative misinformation. We are not going to do the Conservatives' work for them. The reality is that Canada's financial record is very strong. We have a AAA credit rating. We have the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the entire G7. But speaking of our economy, we have to begin with the fact that we're living in a completely different world. Let's begin with the threat that Donald Trump poses. And as Karina suggested, we have to seize the opportunity of this wave of Canadian enthusiasm to build, to attract investment and jobs.
Your time is up. So I'm also asking Mr. Kennedy, $60 billion. How many years does it take to come back to a balanced budget? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Well, I have a plan to balance the budget, the operational budget, in 3 years. But in terms of the budgetary situation here, the fiscal situation, we've seen an increase in spending across the Federation.
Well, then he'll definitely be able to balance. Well, I guess he's saying that it won't be balanced.
It outstrips our economic
growth. On the third year, it'll be back to balance.
By 100%. So in order to invest in public services, we have to change the way we manage our spending so that we can get proper results.
To talk about the deficit, you're talking about a tax cut, an increase in the military budget, and an increase to 2% for NATO. Where are we going to find the money to ensure that the deficit decreases while yet increasing military expenditures and cutting taxes? Where's the money going to come from?
Well, first of all, this is one of the reasons why military spending is important. It has to be increased between now and the end of the decade.
Good point. Why isn't she jumping in to be like, hey?
What's important about military spending is to strengthen the security of Canadians. That's really what's important. That's why we have military spending.
But I guess
it's not
the
just
downside is then she has to take accountability for the fact that we have a deficit because of all of the debt financing.
We'll get to a balanced budget.
3 years.
Mr. Bayless.
Well, I'm certainly going to bring a more disciplined approach to managing the budget in Ottawa. And
don't you love
does that
how
mean
professional
that I'm
this
going to
stream
be
is?
Cutting services or increasing taxes? No, there's a third way.
Chewing
and that
a
is
quarter
to
pounder
augment
directly in
our
the mic.
productivity. So, as a business leader, I know how to increase productivity. I built a company with 2 people, myself and my mother, and we had 1,000 employees in the end. So, I understand what needs to be done. I understand the private sector and I understand the public sector. I'm the only one here who understands both. Why? Because I have been an elected official, but I'm also a businessman. So I know how to implement government policy that is going to help us build up and grow our economy at an advanced rate.
Thank you. I think that we need to be realistic and direct with Canadians. And as a Liberal, I'm not comfortable to start with budget cuts. We need to talk about this 40 billion that was announced in the fall. It is our duty and our responsibility. We do have agreements with Indigenous people in this country, and we have commitments in the years to come. And I agree, we need to grow the economy. We want to increase productivity. But to think that we can do that in 3 years, well, I don't really think that that's realistic. And at this time, we're facing extreme threats from the U.S., so we have to be able to invest in our people, in our businesses, to protect them against the U.S.
I want to spend some time on this theme. It's very important. Mr. Carney, you spoke about the possibility of reducing transfers to provinces and to persons. Did you not?
No reduction in provincial transfers. No reduction in any initiatives. No, none. No increases, just status quo. Status quo, yeah. We have about 150 million in programs within the government budget. We have to increase productivity. We're in Montreal tonight, which is the center, a hub of AI that has to be put to work for the government. At the same time,
I'd like to add something. I'd like to add something. Yes, it's important to get to a balanced budget, but we have to be clear and tell Canadians, explain that we are in a strong position today. What we need today is invest in productivity without cutting services that are helping Canadians directly.
I have other questions about transfers
I was
later.
the Minister for Service Canada, and when you have experience in governing, you know that we're already using AI to provide services, to make our services more efficient. We can always do more, but at a point in time where we need to support Canadians against economic threats, I don't agree in saying that we're not going to spend anything more. If we made this decision during the pandemic, if we had not made this decision, Canadians would have suffered more and businesses would have shuttered.
Yes or no to the next question. Was it a good idea to cut the GST quickly? Yes or no, Mr. Carney?
Yes.
Oh.
For the purchase of our first home.
That's exactly my plan. Yes, we
I think we
agree
agree on that.
Oh, on
Yes,
AI.
from 5 to
Or
4%
on
because
housing
it helps all Canadians.
No, and I'll be honest with Canadians on that topic. We have to bring some discipline to Ottawa. It's easy to say, yes, we'll give you this and we'll give you that, but let's be clear. We do have a deficit and we have to address it. And we can't promise that we're going to cut the
Can I add one thing?
I want to conclude on this.
It's an important point, I think, because we're talking about investing in our countries. We're all talking about the same thing. For me, we have to use the power of the federal government to drive investment to transform our economy. We're in a crisis. We have to take action.
We have to be liberals. We need a liberal approach. Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin's party, we were always a party of budgetary responsibility and economic growth. We also need the support of Canadians. We can achieve both, We need to support Canadians and
So
be
we're moving on
disciplined.
to another theme, question 3. Well-educated labor interested in economic success, creation of jobs. How are you going to ensure that Canada has access to highly
What's on your mind,
qualified labor?
Nathaniel?
I know that it comes under provincial jurisdictions, and I come back to transfers. Will you maintain the
Yeah, you know,
transfers?
the
I asked the
party
question
of
earlier.
Gretchen
whether
Martin.
to increase them because of the
Those
economic
two dudes who
situation
got along
right
and
now,
agreed on
particularly what's
everything.
going on with our American friends, and the people that I talked about in the public service in Quebec are worried right now and are hearing rumors that there will be a cut in transfers. Earlier, you said no status quo, no risk that there would be
I
any
think
cut
you're
in
saying
transfers to
the
provinces
party
and
needs to
persons.
get back to that party.
Mr. Bayless gets to speak first.
Concerning transfers, provincial transfers, no, that's not where we're going to cut. I want to increase, I want to grow the economy by investing so that we can increase our productivity as well. So we have to believe in ourselves. We have to invest in ourselves. And the thing that worries me is the fact that we've cornered our universities. We've squeezed them. It's not a good thing because it's fundamental to building up an advanced economy. So I'm against the cuts to
Didn't you already announce that,
funding.
or has he changed where he's running?
No cuts to transfers to the provinces. It's now time to increase talent and to train our workers. It's the right time to do that.
Madame Freeland.
Nous sommes des amis.
Well, we're friends. We're friends, but
Ils sont des amis aussi. Mais nous
well,
sommes
they're
des
friends
amis.
too.
Alors,
We are friends.
non, ce n'est pas le moment de couper les
No, this is
Smile
not
and
the
wave.
time to reduce transfers to the provinces.
étroite
It's
collaboration avec les
the right
provinces
time to
concernées.
work more closely than ever with the provinces. And it's
En étroite collaboration
important to ask the provinces to work closely together. What I'm seeing among the provinces is a tremendous willingness today to unite as part of Team Canada, for us all to work together. We're ready to do that.
vraiment
And
ajouter à la
we
croissance
can
économique
genuinely increase economic growth and prosperity for every single Canadian by creating free trade within our country. It is
Oh,
the
that
right
hit the
time to
spot.
do it, and we can.
No, I would not cut any transfers to provinces or territories. I don't think it's the time to do that. And it's important to know that I would respect the jurisdiction of the provinces. But what we could do as a government would be to modernize our social safety net and make sure that EI, for example, has an increased amount of resources to provide training to our workers. So it would be to cooperate with provinces and territories to use the existing programs on the federal level and to make sure that people would have access to these services and these programs. We need to modernize our social safety net for the 21st century. There are too many for whom it doesn't work.
I'll follow up with the debate, and Madam Gould gets to answer the question first. These last some months, several specialists say that the elimination of barriers to trade between provinces and territory would contribute to favour economic growth in Canada. This is not a new idea. Times seems to be difficult to apply. What would you do to make it work?
As you said, this is not a new idea. Every Prime Minister since Laurier has tried to do it. But I think that what's important to have would be to have dedicated working groups.
No,
according to sectors
for
to
most
see
people,
what
I
are
think
the
it's
regulations,
the average person. It's like
that can
one or
be,
two paychecks before stuff
set
gets
aside
real bad.
while respecting the differences to work together. This is something that I've done with the National Daycare Plan in order to share best practices between provinces and also to see what are the strengths and the weaknesses and how we can do things. This is federal work to work together to find solutions, and this is how, what I would do, I would have
That's evil,
frequent
Nathaniel.
meetings with the Council of the Federation to make sure that this Team Canada approach would be strong.
Mr. Carney.
Well, yes, let's be clear. we need to increase our GDP by 5%. That's much more than the impact
Who's going to come out and say
we have
free
to
childcare
reduce
for everybody?
prices by 15% as
$10
well.
childcare for every
We're
mother.
facing an affordability crisis in Canada. How do we do that? First of all, we have to convene premiers, and the federal government has to lead the initiative. We have to scrap federal barriers. There are many of them, and I know that the government's already working on this.
For the Liberals?
Thirdly,
yeah,
we need to have a meeting with no
but who up there is going to say it?
preconceptions.
Because I bet you most Canadians wouldn't know that's your plan.
We have to scrap barriers which need to be torn down.
I think this is an extremely important issue. And Karina's right when she said that this is something we've been trying to do for a long time. But I think the time for it has really come because Canadians are smart. And everyone understands that we're facing an existential threat coming from Trump. So if Trump doesn't want free trade with us, it is clear that we need to have free trade within Canada. Canadians are ready. I'm very happy with the initiative by the Premier of Nova Scotia, who suggested a reciprocal approach among provinces. That is a very good first step. And we have to move fast.
No, I didn't hear them mention
Mr. Trump
the
is
ICC.
moving fast, so we have to move fast too, and we can. Canadians are ready.
I mean, they did talk about both Russia and
It's a
Israel,
challenge.
Palestine.
It's going to be difficult, and it's not enough to say, it's not reasonable to say we're just going to deal with it. So I have two projects that will help with this. First of all, is to establish two natural gas pipelines from Alberta to east to diversify our markets. And secondly,
Yeah.
I also
No, that's a good point. No one wants to touch it.
have the other project is to build
I'm surprised
a
they went in
Trans-Canada,
so in depth on the Israel
high
Palestine
energy
stuff.
power line. And that's how we're going to be able to
We're now moving on to another thing. We'll
abolish
talk about
the
supporting the Canadian
interprovincial trade
population.
barriers.
As you know, the pandemic hurt quite a bit. We had high inflation. We have an important lack of affordable housing, and the cost of the groceries keeps increasing. The whole cost of living is increasing. So as a Prime Minister, what would you do to help Canadians? Ms. Freeland speaks first.
Vous avez raison.
You're
La
right.
vie est trop difficile pour les gens.
Life is too difficult for people,
Sont vraiment inquiets
and
par la menace
Canadians
qu'il représente.
are very concerned about the threat that Trump represents. I have a very concrete and specific plan to help people with affordability.
Des
I
taxes
would
pour la
begin
classe moyenne.
by reducing taxes for the middle class.
Le taux d'intérêt
After
pour les
that,
cartes de crédit.
I would
Après ça, je vais
limit
ajouter
credit card interest rates,
place dans les
and then
garderies
I would add 100,000 daycare spots.
de logement et un
Then
logement abordable.
I would
Mais la chose la
ensure there
plus
was more
importante
affordable housing created.
Pierre
The
Poilievre
most important thing we need to remember, however, is that Pierre Poilievre will cut and cut and cut. And that's why the conversation that we're having now is extremely important, because the Liberal Party is the only party that can grow the economy and
Mr.
support
Bayless, 1
Canadians
minute.
at the same time.
Inflation caught us all off guard and hit our vulnerable segments of the population. So I have solutions for this. First of all, I want to bring a budget discipline to Ottawa, and the second thing is to increase our productivity. Through budget discipline, we will in fact allow the value of the Canadian dollar to increase and the value of goods to go down. And by increasing our productivity, we will have more money in our
The
pockets.
on-about
So that'll be a
controversy is
double effect.
already picking up
The things
steam
are going
on,
to cost less
because
our dollar
steam
will
on
have a
Twitter,
higher
I
value,
see.
and we will have more spending power. So
Or
this
wait,
is how
it
we're going
was
to deal with
the
this cost of living issue.
with
It's
on.
not through an isolated program
Sorry.
here and there. We need
Not
a whole
with
system
the-
approach.
Ms. Gould?
When
Thank
Carney
you.
accidentally said, we agree with
does it mean
Hamas,
If we
rather
say we're
than
going to
we,
have the
we agree
strongest
on
economy of the
Hamas.
G7, if it does not work for
Not
Canadians,
great.
and if it's hard for them to pay their rent or to pay their groceries, we need to have an economy that supports Canadians and works for them. What does it mean? I'm going to cut the HST. This will be about $700 in savings. I have a housing plan to create more housing to help first-time home buyers to enter into the market and to make sure that we put an end to homelessness, because poverty is expensive in our country. And I want to modernize our social safety net to make sure that seniors, that people with a disability, people who have lost their job, have access to basic services, and that there is a guaranteed income.
Well, look, I'd like to add that I intend to cut taxes for middle-class families. As I've just said, as Ms. Freeland has just said, I'll cut GST on new homes. I would focus on investing in programs such as daycare that Pierre Poilievre intends to cut. He will cut them. He's the wrong person at the wrong time for the Canadian economy. As I've just mentioned, a strong Canadian economy will bring down prices. It's important to seize this opportunity to do that. And also, we have to strengthen competitiveness in key sectors like broadband.
Little question here. How much does a grocery basket cost for the average family? For four people?
I'm not the one who deals with the food shopping at the house.
200 to 250 in Toronto. It's about 250. Yes, I've done grocery shopping.
According to two organizations, it's approximately...
I save more than my husband when I do the shopping.
It's $300 per week. That's the Canadian average.
If you'll allow me.
No debate on this.
Are they trying to argue with the average grocery price?
At 10, not at 11. So follow-up question with a 5-minute debate, and I'm starting with you, Mr. Bayless. Immigration is a crucial element of Canada's success over the last few
But
years.
it also kind of feels like at this point, like not to do like, hey, I'm single, I'm more important, but like when we go average like family grocery like thing, if you're buying for a family, generally you can buy in more bulk amounts. So it might have, like, because it's like when I go for groceries, I can get, and maybe it's this is I can do, but like, if I stretch it in a real strategic,
I'd like to say that
I can make $150 in groceries last 2 weeks.
My parents.
That may also be why I'm so
My
skinny.
mother comes
but
from Barbados and my father from Britain.
It's a whole nother can of worms.
And we have also immigrants from India in our family. Having said that, we do have to control the number of immigrants, and especially for permanent residents, and also for students. So we have to have a smart immigration system.
Big bags, frozen chickens.
So we should step back and reinstall that.
Mr. Carney, you said today that you're going to maintain the immigration thresholds while Quebec comes demanding to have them cut. So, what do you plan on doing with immigration thresholds if you become president?
Okay, Richard. Yeah.
First of all my grandparents.
Well, you make a bunch of the breasts at one time, and then you make pulled chicken.
There's a housing
You
crisis.
store that in the your containers, and you just pull it out as need be.
But there's been a huge hike in the number of immigrants across the country over the past few years. So we have to have a cap for some time so that we can...
Oh no, am I bougie?
This cap that you wanted, we'll have a little bit of difficulty imagining what the cap should be.
Well, there will be difficulties. There were errors in the past. That's clear. I'm here proposing change. We need to resolve the issues, but it takes time.
It takes time. It takes daycare service, takes schools, housing.
Yeah, we have to invest in daycare as well.
Ms. Free.
I want to start by thanking Frank for what he just said. It's very important, and it was very well said, the contribution that immigrants make. Thank you. It's very important that we maintain Canada as a country that welcomes immigrants. But if we are to achieve that, we need to have enough social services and housing for the people we welcome and invite. So as Prime Minister,
Oh, hey, T-Rex.
I would
How are
make
you?
sure there was a link
Today's been pretty
between
good.
housing and immigration. And when that link is there, we can reach a balance that will be good for society and good for the economy. I'll conclude by saying that we need to use the talent
Nathaniel,
of
why are you
immigrants
doing
who
this to
are
me?
here. One aspect of that notion, seizing opportunity that the Trump crisis presents, is to recognize the qualifications that have been earned abroad. There are too many doctors driving cabs. We have to change that.
I'm the only one who hasn't spoken yet. I thought everyone had.
It's happening again.
So on the question of immigration,
Just in time for March 13th.
we have to be honest with Canadians. The government was too ambitious with the immigration targets over the past few years. I think that everyone and the Liberal Party sees the importance and the value of immigration. My grandparents arrived here with $5 in their pocket, and now I'm a minister in the government. But we do have to have conversations with provinces and territories to understand what is the capacity. Well, if a province says we have too many, well, we need to have this dialogue to set targets. And if you'll allow me to end, what we haven't spoken about is temporary immigrants, international students, and temporary workers. This figure was very high, over 2 million people entering every year. And these conversations need to be had in order to know how many can we absorb so that everyone who arrives in Canada has the opportunity to succeed and to have a good life here.
Over to you.
We know that we're looking for a number. So, est-ce que Canada can take 100 immigrants per year? Of course. Can we have 100 million immigrants per year? Of course not. So, we have to find the figure that we can, and it's linked to our capacity for health services and housing. So we have to sit down with provinces to find what is this figure, so that we can come.
What we have to do is to try. We need to recognize that the law needs to be changed because we are a welcoming country
You've
for
got 20
students.
seconds each, the two of you.
I would say very quickly that we can't allow the kinds of comments about immigrants that we're hearing coming out of the U.S. at the moment. We can't have that in Canada. It is very important that we say it because some people want us to say the same kinds of things. That's unacceptable.
20 seconds.
How much? 20 seconds, okay. Christula has drawn a link between immigration and the housing crisis. She's quite right. We have to build millions and millions of new homes here in Canada, and we have to strengthen our programs, like the Housing Accelerator Fund that works here in
Question
Quebec.
3 on this theme. The Canadian health system is facing huge challenges like the aging population, the lack of professionals, waiting lists that are quite long, in particular for surgery in Quebec. In Quebec, well, of course, is responsible for health, like other provinces, but it has all the same problems as well. Earlier, you said that there won't be any increase in transfers. But our health system, we're just talking about the health system in Quebec. Yet, if our health system needs more money in order to work properly, how will you think of, not think of increased transfers? Because we need them now, Mr. Carney.
Madame Freeland, pour la réponse.
Ms. Freeland starts off.
OK. Alors, je suis tellement d'accord que
I
notre
completely
système de
agree
santé est
that our healthcare system is extremely important to us. It's part of our Canadian identity, even. We need a good healthcare system. I must also say that I respect the jurisdiction of provinces and territories when it comes to health. I've had a number of conversations with provincial and territorial premiers who say that they manage the system. The federal government has already put in a great deal more funding. We need to talk about results with Canadians, and there's some specific things we need to do as well. I propose that we invite Canadian physicians working in the U.S. to come back.
And we can also tax them, right?
And, well, they'll pay the same taxes as everyone else.
No, les Canadiens.
That's not. You think they should return
Want
Parliament
to come back to Canada
at this point?
because they understand that we're under threat.
I mean,
and they don't much like what President
I
Trump
don't
is
know
doing in
if
the
I
U.S.
necessarily disagree with you.
Alors, j'ai passé 40 ans de
But not they can do it.
I spent quite a bit of time working in the health sector myself, and I do have a plan for us.
What really
We are
terrifies
gonna
me
have
is
the
that,
best
like,
health system in the world.
the
Yes.
experience we
And
had
it's doable.
in the first maybe
But we knew
year
we
of
need to change
COVID
our paradigm.
was a thing we were only
Our
managed.
system
We were only
was
able to muster
geared
once,
towards emergency and acute care.
and we will not
What
be
we
able
need
to rally
is
like
a
that
system that deals with chronic care.
twice in such quick
What is that?
succession. I hope I'm wrong.
Right now, there are
That's
two
my
entryways for the
like
health
one of my
system.
biggest
You either
fears.
have a doctor, or you have to go to emergency. And of course, I don't have to describe how things
Carney's?
proceed
Or whose
in the
book?
emergency. So, and I think that it's important for us to train
Which one was that?
nurse
Which
practitioners
was something
that
about
can work at home,
currency or
visit
whatever?
people at home.
Trying to remember
And
what the
I
name
think
was.
that we also have to broaden the scope, professional scope of pharmacists,
Values,
so that
yeah, that was
they
it.
can,
Prescribing
so that they can
medicines.
have the. Yes, they're trained to do
I'll,
it.
maybe I'll look it up.
They have a wide scope of.
To give
They
them
are
more,
trained to
they've
do quite a
received more
bit,
powers
but we
recently,
don't
but even
let them.
more. Mr. Carney.
Well, first of all, we have to maintain provinces for the provinces, and we have to respect their jurisdiction, including Quebec's jurisdiction, of course. Secondly, we have to eliminate obstacles to nurses and physicians here in Canada. We should only have one Canadian economy, not 13 different ones. Thirdly, we have to build a healthcare system which is modern. We have to use, as Mr. Bayliss mentioned, one single digital medical file across the country. It has to be a national file, and we have to increase the use of AI within the healthcare system. And as the federal government, we can work
Down to 1,000
in cooperation
conspiracists going like,
with the provinces.
digital ID! He said digital ID!
500
Oh,
billion in the United States on artificial intelligence, and a lot in France as well. Not part of the debate, but
Yes,
there it
we
is.
have to invest.
C'est une augmentation.
Non,
We have to increase our spending on AI.
Mr. Jobin,
Oui, je suis d'accord avec vous.
AI can't do everything.
Non, je suis
We have to
d'accord
add
avec
physicians as
I
well.
agree.
l'intelligence artificielle.
And Canada's very strong in AI. We have to leverage that. We have the capacity.
Well, it takes a lot of time. Chronometer. Madam Gold.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize that there are francophones outside of Quebec as well, and they need healthcare services in their provinces and territories.
Yes, you can do that. Probably do that. Let us know what you think.
As you said, this is a provincial responsibility. So what can the federal government do? We can increase transfers, but it's the same taxpayer that wants to see results. And we want to make sure that the provinces are using the funds responsibly rather, to have results for Canadians. I think that A lot of money was spent without seeing results, and it's not up to the government of Canada to have the results. It's up.
I don't know if
it's for
there's a
Canadians
clear winner.
because this is the money of Canadians. So for provinces and territories, they have to be honest with their citizens.
Like,
with
I don't
what
know,
they're
like,
doing.
if
and I think that
there hadn't
I want
been
to have
any other
agreements with provinces and territories
if this
on
debate
mental health
had
services.
appeared
This is
fully
also
formed
important
and none of the
everywhere.
rest of the leadership debate
Ms.
or
Gold.
leadership race up
Let's
until
go
this
to
point
question
had
four.
happened, I don't think so. I don't think this would anyone would be convinced one way or another. I
Fentanyl's
don't
killing
think.
people in our communities.
Maybe some
So
would, but I don't know if you
people are
have
scared for their
enough
lives
to
and their
like
security
say,
in major cities.
this
We see it
person's
here
the
in
clear
Montreal
winner.
and Toronto. A lot of violence in the streets almost every day. As a Prime Minister, how would you find the balance between an obligation of fighting against criminality, that's the police, and the necessity to attack the underlying causes of criminality through help organizations, community organizations? Ms. Gould, you get the answer.
First of
Yeah,
all,
I mean, I guess
people
probably you would say Bayless.
need to feel
If everything was
safe
equal,
in their houses and their communities.
at this point you could probably say Bayless maybe benefits
This
the
is
most because French is the
crucial
best.
for us as Canadians, and in my community of Burlington, we've seen an increase in crime, as you mentioned, here in Montreal and in other parts of the country. As federal government, we need to make sure
It would be
that
very
we
cool
have
to have a
laws
prime minister
that
from
ensure
Burlington.
that people who steal vehicles, but not just that, that they're in this supply chain, that they are responsible. We have businesses here in the Port of Montreal that are benefiting from vehicle theft and property theft. So we have to change the criminal code to make sure that our laws can be enforced, but also it's up to provinces, territories, and municipalities to make sure that their police forces have the necessary tools to protect the citizens.
Ms. Freeland.
I would begin by saying that I completely agree with Karina. Security and safety are paramount. You're quite right to put the question, because people today don't feel safe in their cars and often in their homes. And the Liberal Party needs to be very clear with Canadians. We will deliver. Now, how do we do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I didn't even
closely
read that comment out,
with
Nathaniel. I'm
all
like, that's
levels of government and
Come on, man.
police forces. We've done it in Brampton, and we've had results within a few months. We also have to more effectively control the border, including with the use of AI, because one of the reasons that there is so much car theft is that it's possible to export stolen vehicles.
Anyone hear any rumors about Carney's location?
We need to
Because he
spend
just
money
got
on
approved
that.
to
The
run
federal
again, but
government
Lewis
is
keeps telling me
responsible for the
Ottawa
border,
South.
and we
My
have to
theory is-
control it more effectively.
Mr. Bayless.
We have problems.
I thought I
And
kept hearing
because
Vanier
it starts
because
with
that's where
homelessness,
he
and
already
the lack
lives.
of affordable housing.
I know
and,
Edmonton, but like
and that's what pushes people into criminal lifestyles. I don't.
Go ahead.
Non, mais si vous permettez de finir, là,
No, please allow me
It's
to
not
finish.
right what he's saying.
I'm not trying to blame people.
He's got roots in
who
Ottawa, I
have
think, at this
problems.
point.
We have to help them. But having said that, there are things that we can do. For example, Mr. Trump was talking about reinforcing
That would be
the border.
pretty maverick move to
given
just
into him
have
on
a
that.
prime minister from the Northwest
I
Territories.
I would have said we also have a problem with the border because there are a lot of illegal weapons that get through the border. So we should have a negotiation on that, and not just I'll give you whatever you want. And secondly, the government creates laws. And now there are all kinds of technologies that we can incorporate into our legislation so that our police can use this technology so that they can update their fight against crime.
Wow. There needs to be a big change here. Mr. Bailey and my colleagues are right. We have to secure the border. That's the federal government's responsibility to do that. We have to invest in the police and surveillance. We have to work with the Americans on this. because most firearms come here from the US.
Troisièmement, il faut renforcer,
Let me finish. We also have to strengthen the criminal code
les actions violentes comme
for
la
violent
violence
crime,
conjugale.
like domestic violence as well. We have to
Les armes à feu.
have a buyback program
Lanceman
for
and
firearms
Barrett
to
have
put
now
others
both
against that.
tweeted about
He's quite happy to see
with or
AR-15s on our streets
mix-up.
here in Canada.
I agree with what Mr. Carney was saying, but when Mr. Bayliss was speaking, what I wanted to say is that we can't blame people who are homeless for crime. That's not right. You said, yes, you said
Ooh, here we go.
crime
There's some contention.
was caused by homelessness. And I think that it's really important to be honest that these are criminal organizations. It's organized crime that is stealing vehicles, or that is breaking and entering into homes. Vehicles.
No. Oh, thank God.
Or that is breaking and entering into homes. The only solution for that is to reinforce our borders, our
still chugging
criminal
along.
code, to make sure that we try to end firearms entering into our country, but it's not right to equate
Another
homelessness
question,
with
and we're
crime.
changing up a little bit. It's a follow-up question, followed by a 5-minute debate. In fact, I have 2 questions for you. Bill 96, adopted by the National Assembly of Quebec, modifies the Official Language Act, including an article affirming the existence of a Quebec Constitution. Are you ready to recognize such a Constitution and Quebec-specific character? Who wishes to attack that? Let me see who's supposed to. Well, it's Ms. Freeland who's up on this one first. On the Quebec Constitution, would you apply?
Je veux commencer en parlant de
I'd
la
like to
langue
begin
française.
by talking about French. I believe that it's extremely important
Oh, there we go.
to be clear that French is in decline.
Oh, I was just about to say that. Who's going to be the first one to say French is in
It's
decline?
also very important
The Bloc Québécois'
to
favorite
point
question
out
at
that,
question
in my
period.
view, all Canadians understand that Mr. Trump is a threat to our country and our economy. He's also a threat to our identity. And our identity includes our bilingualism. It includes French. And for that reason, I think that now it is more important than ever that we respect and support French and support francophones across Canada, as well as anglophones in Quebec. I'll conclude in saying that when I was elected in 2013, my French was very
I'm
weak.
talking about a Quebec Constitution.
I am ready to support French and bilingualism across Canada. That's very important.
Anybody else want to answer?
The Liberal Party is a party that upholds the Charter of Rights and Liberties of Canada. And as a Liberal and as a Prime Minister, my work will be to make sure that all Canadians throughout the country, in each province and territory, have access to their rights and freedoms. So whether Anglophones in Quebec or Francophones outside of Quebec, I recognize the importance of the French language here in Canada, but in my opinion, the Charter of Canada is the Charter of Canada.
Mr. Bailey.
First of all, I can't say if I agree or not because I haven't seen this charter. So I should read the document first to see what it contains, to see if I agree or not. Concerning Bill 96, it's discriminatory against young Francophones who want to learn English as a second language, who tell their parents, if I told parents, listen, you can't learn math, they would say, are you crazy? But if I tell them, you can't learn English, which is a business language, that doesn't make sense. So I'm against Bill 96 because I think it's discriminatory against young Francophones.
Mr. Carney, for or against?
Oh, Mr.
Interesting
Chauvin,
argument, flipping that on its head.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a constitutional expert either.
OK? Je suis pragmatiste. Et
I am a progressive. There are major challenges facing the French language here in Quebec. We have to strengthen the French language, have to promote it. And now, Francophone institutions like French CBC are in danger. They're in danger because of Pierre Poilievre. He intends to abolish it. It's incredible. It's at the heart of our society, our Canadian society. And the Liberal Party of Canada will strengthen French CBC and English CBC as well.
Well, that's something I wanted to underscore, and thank you, Mr. Carney, for having brought it up. We can't allow Mr. Poilievre to become Prime Minister because he clearly said that he will attack CBC and Radio-Canada, and Radio-Canada and CBC share the same infrastructure, so it's a direct attack on our cultural institutions, and Pierre Poilievre is a real menace in that respect.
Yes, and I believe that this is a time when, as Liberals, we need to be united. The Liberal Party will always support Canadian culture, Francophone culture in Canada. We will all support Radio-Canada and CBC. This is a very important time for Canadians. Pierre Poilievre has been very clear. He wants to cut and cut and cut, and that is very dangerous to our identity and sovereignty.
Another specific question about Quebec. What are you going to do with the law on laïcité, which is against the rights that are guaranteed by the Charter? So Ms. Gould starts off.
Once again, the Liberal Party is the party that upholds the Charter of Rights and Freedom. So our work as a federal government and my work as a Prime Minister would be to defend the rights and freedoms of each Canadian. And Quebecers themselves have brought this to the Supreme Court, and they are fighting against this law. As a government, I will support them to make sure that each Canadian in this country will have access to the rights and freedoms.
I would like to add, very well said, Karina. I completely agree. Our party is the party of the Charter, and as Prime Minister, I will always uphold the Charter. I believe that this is not the time,
Nathaniel, I think he still has a house in
to
Rockcliffe.
have divisions and conflicts within our country. What I'm feeling within conversations is that Canadians are more united than ever, united in the idea that we're a bilingual country, that we will support Francophones across Canada, linguistic minorities,
Mr. Carney,
anywhere
on
they are, and we're
Well,
united.
look, I wholeheartedly agree with what Karina said, but I'd like to add the following, as Christian has just said. Now we're facing a situation where we're under attack. Our values are under
Someone
attack
just said
by the Americans.
Carney wasn't screwing up. He was just playing both sides.
We need reasonable accommodation. I respect secularism.
I'm
here in
glad
Quebec.
someone
I
could
respect
find something
that.
to laugh about that.
But that's possible in Canada. It's not possible in the US.
20 seconds.
It's an important thing.
He's playing both sides. Everyone agrees with one of those things.
I've been
Well, what is the fake news I'm peddling,
fighting against
Danny
this
Lee?
bill
I'm literally
ever since it's
just
been
playing
implemented.
the leadership debate.
There was a young Muslim woman, and her parents said that she was doing a good job. She didn't have any problems. Her only crime is that she was wearing a hijab, and we removed her from our employment. So let's be 100% clear. This is a discriminatory law, and
Well, that's annoying.
They don't want to be taxed directly and continue with the climate incentives that I set up as finance minister for the green industrial transition that creates jobs and
Mr.
attracts
Bayless on the
investment.
carbon tax.
Hold the line.
I would implement a climate policy that would have a tangible and direct impact on the environment based on the recognized model.
OBS crashed, unfortunately.
Polluter pays.
But we're back now.
The system that we have right now doesn't work. We'll implement a
I
system
usually
that
get
does work,
one or two
where
of those,
everybody
'cause I don't have the
contributes,
best computer.
individuals and industry alike. Of course, there's a cost to collecting waste. There's a cost to
Probably.
water
clogging up
treatment and for pure air.
C drive.
And people who say that we can do that without a cost are not honest about it. So right now, the carbon tax doesn't really deal with the issue. I would like to reinvest the funds in programs and Canadian businesses that will implement real changes to the climate situation.
Ms. Gould.
Also, hello to our 5 viewers on YouTube. Welcome.
I'm not going to abandon the fight against climate change. I'm not going to
What do you mean,
concede
what's
on
my
the
opinion
carbon
on
tax.
Trump?
I promised that I
Also,
would
I'm a
cancel
journalist, so I
the
just don't have
increase
to say.
That was set for April the 1st, but we need to be honest with Canadians. It's a price on pollution, and this represents 10 to 15% of the reduction in our emissions, and that's a lot of what we're doing. And as a mother with 2 children, I cannot allow the planet to burn. I
No
have to do my
thoughts, head
share
empty,
to
only
make
journalism.
sure that we can have clean water and clean air. And when Canadians say that they don't agree with the price on pollution, it's really a question of affordability right now. So we need to deal with affordability, and then we need
Mr.
to
Carney,
do
what are you
something
going to do
with
with the
climate
carbon
change.
Well, first of all, I've devoted most of my career to fighting climate change. Recently, as the UN Special
Well, I mean,
Envoy, we're in
Elon did do
Montreal.
that salute
Montreal was where
in
the
front of
protocol
everybody.
was signed, where the COP15 was held as well. We know that it's a
Walks like a
duty
duck in it.
for Quebec and Canada
Extends that elbow at a
to deal with
45-degree
climate change.
angle, like a duck.
As the Canada I know. Secondly, we're in Montreal, which is the headquarters of Hydro-Quebec.
Also, I forgot that
It's
one worked twice
an
because they
economic
also do duck
imperative
walk.
for Canada and Quebec. It's an economic imperative to reduce greenhouse gases so that we can have
I mean, usually,
clean manufacturing.
it's usually
so
like
we can have
you go up on a
clean
stage in front of a bunch of
infrastructure so that we
people
can
and
have
then
good
do a
jobs and export abroad as
Nazi
well.
salute. It's usually case closed.
And we have to have a better trade relationship with the EU.
Show me the video of her doing that.
But Mark, what would you do
So I
about
noticed
the
you only go to
I'll be
the
cancelling it.
screenshots.
On consumers and small and medium businesses and farms, and I'll replace it with a system where
I mean,
big polluters
Freeland
pay.
has been jumping in quite a bit to
Households
correct
won't
his
pay.
French,
We
so I don't know
agree.
if that's
And
true.
I'd like to say something very quickly. It's very
10 seconds,
important
okay.
I have
for
seen the
us
picture
as a political
that everyone
party
keeps sharing
to
around.
listen to Canadians.
And I have seen the
And
video of her
Canadians
doing
have
it.
been very clear. We have to win against Pierre Poilievre, and with Pierre Poilievre, we lose everything.
So, we now have a 5-minute debate, and Mr. Carney will answer the question that I'll put to you. I said that there was people from the party that sent in some of the questions, and Stéphane from Quebec answers to the survey. It says, with the acceleration of climate change that opens up new commercial routes in the Arctic, it might be the next world
notes for you.
geopolitical. How would your leadership reinforce the sea sovereignty and security of Canada in the face of the new issues with military bases, submarines, etc.? How we're preparing for the threat to the
I
Arctic?
don't think I did say that.
Was that a
I
young
said I've
liberal
seen
who
the
asked that
photo
question?
everyone keeps using. I said you did.
Stefan, it's a very good question. It's one of the greatest risks for our country. We have to strengthen the security in the Arctic. Everyone knows this. I was born in the Arctic, in the Northwest Territories. I know it well. So we need to have at least 2 military bases in the Arctic region.
At least
How do we
2.
do that?
So he's doubling
That's the
down on,
difference between
or
us.
doubling
Between the Liberal
the
Party
one
and Pierre
promised new
Poilievre.
base.
Pierre Poilievre
Or did he say two new bases
takes a
or
flight
two
to
in total?
Nunavut, like an emperor.
Well, he did
And
say
he
at
says,
least
we're going to
two.
build a base here. And he comes back to Ottawa, to his mansion in Ottawa.
So you assumed what I meant.
I've had conversations with the Premier of Nunavut. We're talking about building a base, the possibility of securing the Arctic, while at the same time
Show me, because I knew
increasing
what you were going to show
the
me.
prosperity of people in Nunavut, including Inuit.
We
of
don't need
course.
new bases?
We have to cooperate and work with them.
Well, we have to do it pretty quickly because the ice is melting.
But it's Canada, isn't it? We don't have emperors here.
One thing that I totally agree with, that we do need military bases in the north, and we need to do this in cooperation with
I guess
Indigenous
everyone
peoples
disagrees with you,
and, the
Nathaniel.
Northwest Territories. But a difference that we have is that you don't want to reach the 2%.
Put a base in Greenland, yes.
NATO
I'm sure
spending until 2030.
the Greenlanders will be very happy to hear that.
And if we're going to protect the Arctic, our borders, our sovereignty, we need to invest more quickly. I have two ways of doing it. First of all, by increasing the salaries of members of the armed forces. We don't pay our soldiers enough, and we can do military purchasing in a better way. We need to fast-track this to make sure that we're able to protect the Arctic.
Mr. Bayliss.
So if you go on my website, you'll see my program for Canada's defense, and it's clearly laid out that we have to protect the Northern Passage. It's a national priority to protect the Arctic. And as Madame Gould underscored, we have to pay our military better. Now, we are going to invest. We have to invest 2% of our GDP for defense, but we have to do it intelligently to protect the North. And that's how we're going to meet this challenge.
Stéphane, thank you for the question. It's so important. The reality is that today we can no longer rely on the United States to defend us, because now it's the U.S. president who is threatening our sovereignty. So we need a new approach to national security and defense, and it has to begin with the Arctic, the North. We have to work very closely with our northern allies, including Denmark, which is also being threatened. We have to work with our European allies who have nuclear defense capabilities, France and the UK, and we need to invest in our own defense. I agree with Karina. I do believe we need to invest the full 2% by 2027. But I wouldn't send those checks to the U.S. industrial military complex. I want to invest in Canadian companies.
And it's 30 seconds only because we're almost through.
And back.
30 seconds.
I will respect the time. I'd like to add the following. 80% of each dollar goes to the U.S., a country which is threatening us. And this is the reason why I've said that we have to increase defense spending by the end of the decade.
Collective Arts Passion
We can do it more quickly, of course, but we have to invest here in Canada.
So let's talk about energy here in Canada. Yeah. New pipelines might be necessary. I know we're sending oil to the United States. There was also talk about an east-west pipeline that Quebec refused. So what do we do? If the idea of implement comes back, you said two things, Mr. Carney. You said we'll never impose a pipeline to Quebec, but you also said it could be possible to use the federal government's power, including emergency powers, to accelerate projects that our economy needs. So what does that mean? It can't go through all of Canada and not go through Quebec. Quebec says, no, how are you going to manage that?
Pretty simple, really. A project like Energy East is possible. It's a fact. It's possible to build an oil pipeline from Quebec to the Maritimes, from Alberta to displace our oil exports to the US. 70% of our oil comes from the US today. Our neighbor, no longer our friend, of course. I think it's an opportunity for us that we should seize. Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan have to agree, they have to buy in.
But Quebec right now, because it's Trump that's threatening, but maybe Quebec
He has not been asked about the finance minister offer yet.
Everything's changed. It's quite possible that they now say yes. A final point, the federal government has to act quickly and rigorously to support a project like Energy East if it's in the interest of the whole country.
Ms. Freeland.
We need to do two things. We have to diversify our exports, and we've already done that with energy infrastructure. That's a good thing, and we have to continue.
I will note your advice,
Also,
Danny Lee.
have to be more resilient with
May not follow
homegrown
it, but
energy.
it is noted.
In the riding I represent, people are heating their homes with natural gas that comes through a pipeline going to the US. That position is dangerous for us, and we have to do something about it. We have to change that.
Ms. Gould.
Thank you. Energetic security has become a very important issue for Canada. I'm not sure if it's a pipeline or if it's a discussion on refining our resources here in Canada, but it's a conversation that we need to have. We need to have this conversation while respecting provinces, territories, and Indigenous peoples.
Trump wants to build the XL pipeline.
We need to protect our energetic security. We need to see how we can go forward with the resources that we have, and also we need to fight against climate change. I'd also like to say that I know for people here in Quebec, but also throughout the country, the cost of gas is something that concerns them greatly. So how can we work together to protect our energetic security, protect our economy, our sovereignty, and ensure a better future for Canada?
Well, it's time to have an honest discussion with Quebecers. We can the three ways of transporting oil. We can transport it by boat, pipeline, or train. Now, when it comes to shipping, just imagine if there was an accident on the Maritime Seaway, St. Lawrence Seaway. It would be an ecological catastrophe.
Hydrate.
Concerning rail transport, remember what happened in Mégantic. So I've already announced that we're going to put into place two gas pipelines, one to bring natural gas from Alberta towards the eastern Canada, and the other one to take natural gas towards the west of Canada. It would diversify our markets, it would be good for Canada, and it would also be good for the environment, because it would give
No, I think Danny's probably going to keep the flag.
markets to replace oil and coal with natural
May I
gas.
add something quickly? I want to thank Karina for mentioning Indigenous people.
Well, First Nations have to be involved in this. What would be your approach with them? If Quebec says no, maybe the First Nations, and they're now partners, and they have thought we have to consult them.
Thank you, Karina. And, of course, the participation of Indigenous people in our energy projects are extremely important. As Minister of Finance, I created a $5 billion program to make it possible for Indigenous communities to take part in the project
using bank accounts
and to create greater prosperity
qualifies as
for
Nazi
Indigenous
behavior.
communities. This is a start, but Canada must continue to include Indigenous people in our major natural resource projects. It boosts prosperity and reconciliation.
It's 9:47. I still have a few questions. If we have time, I can come back and we can talk about this again. The government Trudeau announces that it'll go forward with a project of $10 billion for a high-speed train between Quebec and Toronto. These major investments might give positive both investment results and climate results. So what's your vision for this project? Is it to be financed essentially by the government? Is it a public project? Is it a private project? Is it PPP? What should be done with this project that Mr. Trudeau is launching? And Mr. Carney has the first word.
Mr. Trudeau announced the TGV this week. He didn't consult me. I don't have the figures. But it is an interesting project. It's very important for our economy in terms of how we fund this project. It's clear that there has to be public and private funding. It's clear that the federal government has committed to invest about $4 billion over the next decade to prepare for the project. Now, if the project is the right one, if it's viable, well, quite probably the government will support the project.
J'appuie le projet complètement. C'est un projet qui est bon.
I fully support the project. It's good for the environment, it's good for the economy, and it's even good for housing. Because if we have a high-speed rail, that makes it possible for people not to all live in major cities. We need a responsible approach. And a responsible budget means we need to have the funds and use the funds we need to build our country, to boost economic prosperity.
Yes, I support the program. I think it's an excellent idea for two reasons. First of all, it's good for the environment, that's clear, but it's also good for the economy. Why? Because it's going to encourage new links. It's been demonstrated by studies in Europe that with the high-speed train, university professors and business women can travel about much more freely. So it's very good for the economy.
I agree. I think that everyone is in agreement. I've been working on this project for about 10 years. I'm very pleased to see that it's going ahead for all the reasons that my colleagues have stated. But I'd like to highlight that I'd like for us to talk about reconciliation
powerful
more. And that's why I raised this subject.
Statement of agreement from all the candidates.
It's a fundamental issue for the future of our country, and we cannot go forward without partnerships, without the inclusion, without listening to the voices, the ideas, and also the leadership of Indigenous peoples here in Canada.
When did he say that, Brenda? When did he say the Canadian flag was racist?
Thing of the Trudeau government. We have done more, and I would not
we have some 3
abandon
minutes
the
before
Indigenous
your
peoples.
closing statements. So, questions. At what point would you drop the writ? I can answer quickly. It depends where Canada is at that point in time. If we're in a tariff war with the United States, then we'll have to see what the best option is for Canada. Mr. Carney now.
Exactly.
We should never take a decision until we have to.
Before you have to make that decision. I agree with what Ms. Gould has said.
Many times.
We don't want to talk to Trudeau because he doesn't have any
Can you
power. We
provide
want to talk
one
to someone else
example?
who's going to be an elected representative.
Of those many
Yes.
times?
There has to be a government with a clear mandate and a strong mandate at that. It's better to have a Liberal government. Much better.
No, Brenda Capsticks did.
Mr. Jobin, if you allow, there are circumstances, probably not the most probable circumstances, that things might happen. Things might happen by the middle of March. We'll make a decision accordingly.
I've been elected 4 times.
I mean, that's not the question I
I
asked.
have a seat in the House of Commons. So as Prime Minister,
I asked when he said the flag was racist.
I have choices to make, and I would make my choice not on the basis of what the polls say, but on the basis of what's best for the national interest. If on March 10th we're in an economic war with the US, I would talk to provincial and territorial premiers, I would talk to the unions, I would talk to business people, and we would together decide whether Canada should go to an election or keep a stable government. And given the fact that I have a seat in the House of Commons, I would be able to make that decision and decide what is best for
30
Canada.
seconds for Mr. Bayliss, because then it'll be your closing statements.
Well, with the threat of President Trump, it's essential that we have a stable government in place. The problem, of course, is that Monsieur Poilievre is putting his
I'm a
personal
journalist. I don't
ambitions
really do a lot
ahead
of supporting
national
of
interest.
anybody.
So if it was possible to reach an agreement with Mr. Poilievre and say, listen, we need to be strong and united right now so that we can defend ourselves against Trump, that would be wonderful. But if he doesn't want to play along and he puts his own interest ahead of Canada, he's going to force our hand.
Time's out. Time's up. Mr. Bayliss, you have 90 seconds for your closing statement. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, Canada is a country of wide spaces and broad ideas. We're going to have a strong and resilient economy for the benefit of all Canadians. We will have a better health system, in fact, the best health system in the world if we follow my plan, and we'll reestablish the confidence in the federal government when it comes to the delivery of services. And yes, we are going to stand up to President Trump. But let me underscore something that hasn't been said up until now, and it's important for me to do so. The French language and French culture is part of my personal identity. So Quebecers, Acadians, Franco-Ontarians, Franco-Manitobans, and Métis, I want you to understand that I am an ally for you in Ottawa. I will not only fight to protect, but promote.
I don't know when I last got my
French
booster
language
shot.
and culture
It's been a while.
across the country. We will have a Canada that is proud and prosperous. This is the future that I want to build with you. So let's be courageous, let's be audacious, let us aspire to a Canada that we can all be proud of. My name is Frank Bayliss, and I am asking for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bayliss.
Yeah, well, I think everyone just assumes he's a billionaire, because he's like
This
I
evening,
don't know if he's a billionaire, but
You've listened to a debate
because
of
he's a
ideas
rich guy, he's just
and a vision
tanned.
for the country. The reality is that we're not going to be conservatives light to win the elections. We're going to stay true to liberal values. We're going to fight for Canada.
I know.
And to do that,
It's very irresponsible of
we
me.
need policies for today and for the future. Not the same old, outdated political ideas from the 80s and 90s. You've heard my vision for Canada to face today's problems.
Hell yeah.
And we will be confronted with different ones tomorrow. We need new leaders who will fight for Canadians, a leader who understands what people are experiencing and who works each and every day to improve their lives, a leader who is able to stand up to bullies, a leader who will not back down. Canada is the best country in the world to have a family, to build a business, and one's future.
At the debate tomorrow, I think it's Sofal and
of
Andrew
dreamers.
should be there.
That is where opportunities, empathy, and progress work.
It's hill climbers, not risers.
I am the candidate for the future, and this future starts now.
Thank you. Mr.
What's the next
Members
thing
of the
tomorrow?
Liberal Party, Canadians,
What am I
across
forgetting?
the country, you've told me that you're concerned. You're worried about the future. You have told me that you want positive change. You're looking for a leader who can unite us. You want a plan to defend Canada, and that creates opportunities for all. I'm up for that task. I'm not a politician, a career politician. That's true. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a person of action. And when I see an issue, a problem, I want to solve it.
Oh, the
Throughout
next
my
camp.
career,
Okay.
I've managed many economic crises.
Possibly someone from the Wire
built
Report.
Strong economies, and I've raised.
Maybe Paul might be there. I
gone
would
through tough
assume.
negotiations, and I've succeeded. That allows me to have the necessary experience to lead Canada through this turning point in the history of our country. I love our country. Canada has given everything to me, my family, my education, my values. I'm ready to give my all for Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Ms. Freeland?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jobin. Thank you, dear colleagues, for an excellent conversation. Tonight, it's clear that we are strong. We, the Liberals, are strong and united. We agree on a lot of things. Canadians today are coming together to defend our country.
Because most, not all healthcare workers had this
Restaurants
vaccine.
are removing American wines from the menu. Snowbirds aren't going to Florida this winter. Our country is strong, intelligent, and united. I'm very grateful to be here tonight with 3 other Liberals who love Canada, and to address the 400,000 Liberals who love our country as well. Pierre Poilievre agrees with Trump. They both say that Canada is broken. We know it's not. Canada and Canadians are more united than ever. Let's use that passion to make our wonderful country even stronger and more prosperous. Tonight, let's make a commitment to fight for Canada. All 4 of us, all Liberals, all Canadians. Together, we will win.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Freeland. Thank all of you for your presence this evening and having respected the rules. Everything went pretty well, and this is the end, therefore, of this debate for the leadership of the
That was
Liberal
2
Party,
hours.
the French.
That was definitely 2 hours.
My colleague will be the animator tomorrow, and the election will be held on the 9th of March coming up. Thank you very much for having been with us. Do you think that Donald Trump followed the debate this evening? Not the French debate.
Not in French.
Maybe tomorrow.
He knows who I am.
Thank you all. Good luck to each of you.
Got
There's
that
a
one in
few,
there.
Weeks of campaign within the party left. Have a good evening. Thank you, everybody, for having been there. Goodbye.
And that was the Liberal Party leadership debate, the French debate, happening tonight with the English debate set by tomorrow. That, of course, was moderated by former TVA Quebec anchor Pierre Jobin. I'm David Cochran. This is a late edition of Power and Politics. I'm here with the CBC Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barton, and we've got our panel of analysts for this debate night. Jonathan Kalis, former Quebec advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Emily Nicola, a columnist for Le Devoir.
Oh yeah, they all look very
advisor, to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and Caroline Varian, a former
bronze.
chief of staff to Liberal cabinet ministers. So I agree. We heard that a lot in the debate tonight. It was mostly very polite, no vast policy pronouncements, I think, outside of what was within the range
Andre Louise.
of liberal policy positions. The moderator
Andre
quite
Louise?
forceful, in his questioning and pressing people. So I have a couple
Thanks
of
for the follow.
5
Appreciate
questions
it.
I want to kind of just throw to the panel for quick answers before we do a deeper dive on this. And the candidates are going to come out and scrum in a little bit, and we'll be taking that live. So let's start. Jonathan, I want to start with you first. Mark Carney's French, was it good enough for Quebecers, and is it good enough to handle Pierre Poilievre and Yves-François Blanchet in a debate?
it needs work. It's not there yet. It was
I
at
mean,
times
I
good,
think
and at times it was a challenge to understand what he was saying.
Emily, is that your view as well?
When it comes to a debate with Yves-François Blanchet, that's when it would be in trouble. If you're debating other Anglophones, then it's fine. But if you're debating Yves-François Blanchet, which is the real task for a Quebec campaign,
right.
He's going to need to get better. But he's not hopeless. This is not a debate in which Mark Carney's French has made him.
I don't think it doesn't seem like it's bad enough to be
nothing
like
of the sort happened right now.
Okay, Rosie, your thoughts?
Yeah, ditto with all of that. But I would also say at times seem to struggle to understand the question fully, which I think is more problematic for me. But this was not career-ending, but it was certainly a signal that it's got to get better.
No, Blanchet.
Sometimes, what are your thoughts on those
always kills it in
he didn't
debates,
seem super
basically.
comfortable and everything. I found
even in the English ones, he's a threat.
Stories, and that was natural to them, and drive a human element to it. But he was able to answer the question at times. I noticed he struggled with like finding the next word that he needed.
Okay.
In a general election, they need to focus 75% of their debate prep time on French and on dealing with somebody as charismatic and skilled at debating as Blanchet.
Okay.
Can I just say, though, the one thing that he did do is that he referenced Quebec often.
Yeah.
Quebec culture, Quebec language, Quebec industries. He did that perhaps more than anyone else. And I think that that'll go a long way to appeasing some people who may think his French isn't quite there yet.
Okay, Rosie, I'll stay with you for my next one. Did Chrystia Freeland do anything to push through from her position as probably second place right now?
I don't think so. I don't think she needed to. I don't think she got where she needed to tonight. Maybe something will change tomorrow. And I'll say something else. I think she was a little too cozy with Mark Carney. There was a little too much violent agreement between her and him. And that's not what she needs right now. I understand it's difficult. We talked about all that at the beginning, attacking your colleague and another Liberal. But I think tomorrow she's going to have to be a little sharper.
Vandana?
I agree. I think she did.
It's been a very long day for me.
In the agreement,
I don't know if there's gonna be. I'll put the link in here and rate out. But we'll be back tomorrow for the English debate. It's gonna be big. If anyone wants to keep watching, who can I rate you into? Who's still going? I don't know. Who is there? Not really a lot of people who stream anymore. Any suggestions? I was just going to do Amy, because she usually is doing pretty informative stuff. I think it's C3. All right, boys and girls, thank you very much for hanging out. I appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow. Probably start a little bit earlier. Probably start around 6:30, 7-ish. But it's going to be a good one. That's the English debate. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit more spicy than it was tonight, just because they'll all be in their original language and they can mess around a little bit more. All right, everybody. Have a good night. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye now. And for YouTube,